The Greyfriars Cemetery Poltergeist. The story of the Greyfriars Cemetery in Edinburgh is one of the most famous for poltergeist activity in the world. The story revolves around the Black Mausoleum, the site of the private graves of George Mackenzie and his family. Mackenzie was known to be ruthless in his day, and many people were tortured and killed by his hand. The first recorded incident happened in 1998 when a homeless man broke into the tomb in order to find shelter from the cold. Once he was in, he began playing with the coffins, and before he knew it, the ground beneath him gave way and he fell into a pit. This pit contained the decomposing remains of plague victims, which had been dumped and sealed under the mausoleum. Naturally, he fled for his life. But since the disturbance of the tombs, it is said that Mackenzie was awoken from his slumber and became restless. The Greyfriars Cemetery is said to be the place with the highest poltergeist activity in the world. Not long after, people began making claims about unusual activity around the tomb. The city council closed the cemetery to the public until a local tour guide set up an official ghost tour. Since then, 350 people claim to have been attacked by a poltergeist around the tomb, with many people claiming to have fainted or to have been hit by an unseen force, whilst others have been left with strange red marks on their body, with no apparent causes as to how they got there. The Bell Witch. This is one of the best known cases of poltergeist hauntings in the world. This witch set in motion a series of events that ended in a tragic death. In 1817, John and Lucy Bell lived with their children on a farm in Tennessee, USA. It was during this time that one of their children, Elizabeth, became the focus of a malicious entity. In the beginning, a range of noises from scratching and scraping were heard around the house, and it wasn't before long that the poltergeist began upping its game. Elizabeth would regularly be pinched, bruised, and slapped by an unseen force. Nothing she did could prevent these vicious attacks, and for a while, her parents believed she was just crying out for attention. However, that all changed when the furniture seemed to develop a life of its own, and regularly threw itself across the house, with no explanations as to how. Things became more intense when the spirit began speaking, saying it was from heaven, hell, and earth. It also claimed that it was the same witch that haunted another woman in the area. The attacks became so frequent that Elizabeth was forced to move from her parents' house and began living with a neighbour. But still, the poltergeist persisted, never giving her a moment's peace. Sometime later, she got engaged to a local man, but when the poltergeist revealed her most intimate secrets, the marriage was cancelled and the relation ceased. During this time, Elizabeth's father, John, became increasingly ill. The poltergeist took credit for his condition and promised that he would be tormented until his death. On the third year of assaults, John Bell died. A strange bottle was found in the medicine cabinet, and to examine its contents, a small dose was administered to the family cat, who suffered convulsions and died also. The poltergeist shrieked in delight, declaring that she had killed John in his sleep. From that point, the activity began to die down, until it stopped as abruptly as it started. But the poltergeist was not silent for long, as it travelled all over Robertson County, wreaking havoc on many different families and instigating the same torment it did onto others. It wasn't until 7 years had passed until the poltergeist returned to continue from where it left off. In the 1970s, a small house in the English market town of Pontefract was host to the most violent poltergeist haunting in recent European history. It was here that the Pritchard family, Joe and Jean, along with their son Philip and daughter Diane, made their home. Supposedly, they were harrowed by a variety of problems from a ghost called Fred. He threw objects around the house and made rooms colder, left puddles on the floor, and took bites out of sandwiches, as well as smearing strange substances on door handles. One of the more sinister incidents happened to Diane when she was 12. She was dragged upstairs by her neck. When her family came to investigate, they found handprints on her neck. Later down the line, the ghost also tried to strangle Diane with an electrical cable. The house gathered a lot of attention and consequently received visits from the local mayor, the police, and a large number of curious psychics and self-proclaimed paranormal researchers. One person who was convinced that their stories were true was the next-door neighbour. She said the ghost occasionally wandered into her house to stare at her menacingly. All that is confirmed is that the family moved out shortly after. The South Shields Poltergeist. It would seem that the county of Tyne and Wear, England, is a hotspot for paranormal activity. Not far from Pontefract is the town of South Shields, where another supernatural entity terrorized a young couple and their 3-year-old. The haunting began in December 2005 with a very unusual report of activity. This spirit would stack chairs, move chests of drawers, and slam doors. Aside from the usual antics, it took it upon itself in possessing small, cuddly toys. One night in bed, the mother felt her son's toy dog hit her in the back of the head. She sat up and turned on the lights just in time to see a second stuffed dog flying in her direction. The couple cowered from under the bed covers, but felt something tugging at it. All of a sudden, the father screamed, and 13 scratches appeared on his back. Strangely, the scratches were all gone by morning. While the poltergeist had shown that it could cause direct physical harm to humans, it seemed determined that children's toys were the way to deliver its messages. It hung a rocking horse from the ceiling by its reins, then placed a cuddly rabbit in the chair on top, holding a sharp box cutter in its paws. What's more, the ghost would often leave messages on the young boy's whiteboard, and even sent a text that could not be traced to any phone or computer in the world. They were typically threatening messages like, "You're dead." This got so bad that they were forced to call in paranormal researchers Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson. They determined that the presence was real and wrote a book about it. However, little else is known about the family and what happened to them after. The Jabbertickable Poltergeist. In 1965, an 11-year-old named Maria Jose was subject to the most infamous poltergeist in the history of Brazil. It began in her house, in the city of Jaboticabal, when bricks and stones began to materialize out of thin air and smash things. At first, Maria's family thought it was the house, so they called a priest to do an exorcism. However, this was ineffective, as it only angered the spirit, and the onslaught got worse. The largest rock found was 3.7 kilograms, and some of the stones were magnetic and completely defied explanation as to how they had got there and where they'd come from. However, Maria had it even worse than the house, when then her family realized it was her that was being pursued by the poltergeist. She was slapped, bitten, and ended up with bruises covering all her body. Needles would suddenly appear embedded in her skin, and on one occasion 55 had to be removed from a single ankle. The onslaught was relentless, with the poltergeist one night holding cups all over her face to suffocate her as she slept. The problems followed her to school, when her clothes spontaneously caught fire in the lunchroom, with many eyewitnesses and no explanation for the bizarre event. The attacks went on for a year, with no sign of stopping before Maria went to see a medium. The psychic said to Maria that she was being attacked by an angry ghost because she had been a witch in a previous life. It was then that she killed a person, and it was that person's spirit that held a grudge so strong that it planned to haunt Maria for the rest of her entire life. That life was sadly cut very short, as Maria poisoned herself when she was 16. Once she had died, all activity within her house stopped. Got something you want to share? Be sure to leave it in the comments or send us an email. Remember to like and subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching.